Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. I'm Susan Chapman, Director of Member Services for the Tri-Societies. With me is Ann Jorce, Chief Operating Officer at ASTA and representing ASTA's Lead and Fuse committees. We're pleased you've joined us for the 2019 webinar series titled Road Trip of Your Career. This series, using a road trip metaphor, addresses some of the biggest forks in the road that we all face throughout the journey of our careers. This webinar, Where's the Map? Career Planning, focuses on the planning to ensure you get the right experiences and skills to be prepared for your future. This series is a collaboration between ASA, CSSA, SSSA, and ASTA. There's just a few notes before we begin. You're welcome to ask questions via the chat box or the question box on the lower right of your screen. There are two options for posting the question or comment: to all audience members or just to the organizer, myself. So be sure to select either option from the drop-down in the chat section. To keep the flow of the webinar, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentations. After the webinar, you'll receive a feedback survey. Please take a few minutes to give us your thoughts. This is our second webinar series, and we're looking for all feedback, and it will help us build the program. And now I'll turn it over to Jonathan Shaver of Envision Partners, who will be our moderator.
Thank you, Susan, and welcome everyone to the next stop on the road trip of your career. My name is Jonathan Shaver from Envision Partners, a leadership development company focused on the growth and advancement of leaders in agriculture. I'm also an associate member of the American Seed Trade Association and member of the Leadership, Education, and Development Committee. The American Seed Trade Association works on behalf of the seed industry to promote the research, development, and movement of quality seed to meet the world's demand for food, feed, fiber, and fuel. In today's webinar, we will be pulling over for a rest stop with a webinar entitled, Where's the Map? Career Planning. Today we have two speakers, both from AgReliant Genetics, who will share the lessons of their own careers, planned and unplanned. Samantha Bock has been with AgReliant Genetics for 9 years, beginning her career with AgriGold brand as a marketing specialist. In 2011, she took the role of Corporate Communications Manager for AgReliant. During her time in communications, she worked closely with corporate marketing, business development, and AgReliant's digital agricultural platform, Advantage Acre. In April 2018, she transitioned to the company's digital ag lead, responsible for training and integration of digital tools within AgReliant's sales organization. Samantha is currently the Vice Chair for the ASTA Communications Committee and was previously involved with ASTA's Future Seed Executives Initiative. In 2015, Samantha received the Future Giant of the Seed Industry Award. She and her husband currently reside in Fishers, Indiana. Our second speaker, Casey Zeller, has also been with AgReliant for 9 years. Having started his career as part of the sales trainee program, he then served as a business analyst and later the commercial marketing manager, where he managed the implementation of several key projects. Casey also had additional responsibility for Golden Acres genetics marketing and communication efforts. Today, Casey is the marketing development team lead for LG Seeds, where he and his team are responsible for market plan facilitation, brand image development, and management of field-based systems. Casey grew up in Noblesville, Indiana, where his family continues to farm and raise registered Angus cattle. He, his wife, and 2 children live in Noblesville, where they enjoy being near home. Today, we will hear 2 perspectives on career development. First from Samantha, and then from Casey. They will share their experiences and lessons learned about career planning. So Samantha, I'll now turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate the introduction. Casey and I are both here at the AgReliant Genetics headquarters in Westfield, Indiana. I'm going to get things started kind of down the career planning path. So, first question right out of the gate, what the heck is a career plan anyway? So as we kind of pause for a minute and truly look at what the definition of a career plan is, it's truly a vision of your professional goals and objectives. Those of you that are, maybe in the workforce already, or, have had internship experiences with some larger organizations and even smaller companies, most of those companies probably have a mission statement, a vision statement. maybe some core values that those organizations operate focused on. And as you put together your career plan, this is kind of your personal vision, mission, and values. You're taking a look at truly your goals and objectives as they relate to the things that you enjoy and the things that you're good at. A career plan should be time-based, not completely open-ended. You're probably familiar with the SMART goal acronym. The measurable and timely components of that should also apply to putting together a true career plan, giving yourself benchmark dates, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. You do want to make this a vision, so you're thinking down the road significantly, but you want to make sure that you've got some time-based elements within that, so that you have some benchmarks that you're trying to achieve and you can ensure that you're on pace. And then finally, as you think about your career plan, it needs to be an application of your talents, skills, and interests. And I underlined and bolded the word "your" there, primarily because this is your personal plan. This isn't the plan of your parents, your friends, your academic advisor, your supervisor, anybody like that. Those are all going to be great resources and folks that you can lean on as you're putting together your plan. But at the end of the day, this is about you. This is your time to be selfish and focus on the things that you want to accomplish throughout your career. So those are kind of the three big buckets that I like to think about in terms of career planning. And you're probably thinking, all right, Sam, that's great, but how the heck do I get started? Question number 2. There are a great deal of resources out there in the world for you to consider as you're heading down your career planning path. For those of you that are still in college, either pursuing a master's, PhD, the Career Center advisors there on campus are going to be an extremely valuable resource for you. They're going to be able to provide additional resources beyond what I have here. But they've seen this before, they've done this before, they're going to be really helpful, and don't be afraid to use those folks within your proximity as resources. Also, for those of you that are already in the workforce, make sure that you're in communication with your human resources department. Here at AgReliant, we have an internal portal that we use for career planning that we can provide some insight to our managers and teams on the specific goals that we have professionally, the things that we're interested in. You can put together a unique profile, and I know that we're not necessarily unique in that. There are a lot of organizations that utilize similar platforms internally as well. So make sure that you're taking full advantage of those resources that you have under the roof that you're working under. And additionally, a third resource that I wanted to include here is called My IDP. You can find it there at that web address. So if you want to take a screenshot or drop that down here as you're taking a look at this slide. But an IDP, or an individual development plan, this is more of a structured planning tool to really help you identify some of those goals, help you make a plan for improving your skills. This is also going to keep things pretty time-based, and then also, give you an opportunity for some structure with your mentors, because that can be a challenge too. And Casey and I will talk a little bit about that and definitely entertain any questions. But this provides some great resources in facilitating some of those discussions as you're putting together your career plan. So this is kind of a more formal tool to be utilized as your career planning. And when in doubt, I am a true millennial, so when in doubt, just Google it. And if you throw, career plan into Google, there are literally a billion options to help you start to navigate that plan. Make sure that you're using credible resources, of course, but there's a ton of academic resources, some tools and technologies from third parties that kind of help you with challenge questions and help you start to organize your thoughts as you head down the career planning path. So that kind of just lays a fundamental foundation for career planning. Let me just show you a quick snapshot into my career plan. So this was my Master Solid Gold Guaranteed career plan. I was just 100% sure that all of these things were going to happen, and it was going to be on my own time. Just exactly as I planned it, right? That's why you make a plan, is to follow the plan. So first and foremost, I was going to land a dream job within the seed industry. I had a great opportunity to intern throughout my college summers with a pretty outstanding seed company. It's actually a competitor of ours now, but I fell in love with the seed business. I love the competitive nature of the industry, but everyone was working toward a common goal. So wanted to land a job in the seed industry and begin my career in communications. So I was able to do that. Started with AgReliant as a marketing specialist in exotic St. Francisville, Illinois. If you don't know where that is, I certainly didn't either. That's a small town in southern Illinois, kind of right on the Indiana-Illinois border. So got started there, and from there I was going to, stay in that role for 5 years at least, I thought. Really wanted to learn and develop my communication and leadership skills, find those mentors within the organization. Wanted to get involved in some professional organizations. I was pretty involved in college and wanted to continue that in my professional life and continue to grow professionally. Number 3, I did always want to continue my education. I wanted to pursue a master's, and I just assumed that would be in communications and marketing because that was what I was excited about and interested in. Wanted to do that within, 2 years of probably getting started from work. And I wanted it to be an online program. Being in rural southern Illinois, there were a ton of universities, so I wanted to pursue potentially some online opportunities, and also wanted to take advantage of tuition reimbursement. So AgReliant is a pretty sizable company, and we do have the ability to provide opportunities for our employees that include tuition reimbursement. So if that's something you're considering, I definitely recommend that path. So I knew I wanted to take advantage of that. And then finally, kind of next step for me that was a little bit more of a long-term goal, I wanted to pursue communications opportunities at a corporate level. So I was at the AgReliant brand, and AgReliant Genetics is the 3rd largest corn seed company in North America. So I knew that there would be grand opportunities for me later on in my career if I just stayed on my plan and path. So this was it. This was the game plan. Everything was going to go exactly like this. I was just sure of it. Until one fateful day, I was just really a little over a year into my career with AgReliant, and a corporate communications manager position was posted and emailed out through the AgReliant company-wide email. So didn't see this curveball coming. At the time, AgReliant did not have a corporate communications manager. This was a brand new position that was posted and available. And it was described as truly being responsible for the internal and external communications, brand awareness, and company image for all of AgReliant Genetics. And honestly, I couldn't have written a better job description for myself in that particular stage in my life. If I had this exact template, this is what would have been after number 4 on my career plan. But I was only a year-ish into my career, and you could hardly call it a career at that point. So what do I do? So I kind of kept scrolling down on that job description and saw that you needed a bachelor's degree or master's degree in the communications marketing related fields, and 5 to 10 years of experience and management and leadership experience. I hadn't hardly been out of high school for 5 years, let alone had that kind of true corporate level experience that I thought that they were looking for. All of this was kind of in the bottom section of the preferred qualifications, and I thought, well, shoot, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but this is exactly what I want to do. And this is kind of where networking comes into play as well. Casey actually was already here at the corporate office, and so I shot him a note and said, hey, what's this all about? Who's the hiring manager? What do I need to know? And the hiring manager was actually someone that I had just met a couple weeks prior at an AgReliant event, our business development lead. And so I sent him an email and said, hey, I'm really interested in this position. This is exactly what I'm looking for, but I don't have quite the experience or expertise that it's recommending. What do you think I should do? And he said, go ahead and go for it. And this is where I'll pause for a minute and give you rule number 1 of career planning. And to me, I found this quote in a LinkedIn article, but comfort is a beautiful garden, but careers won't grow there. And I absolutely believe that to be true. Had I just stayed in my comfort zone and said, oh, this one's not for me, but this is a great goal for me to have, I'll put it in the fine print of my career plan and I'll get back to what I'm doing, I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I have had. So I did put in my resume, went through the interview process, and it was determined that my internal experience and understanding of the organization was still just as valid and necessary in that role. And I was given the opportunity to be AgReliant's corporate communications manager. So I actually spent 6 years in that role. I had the opportunity to work with 3 different CEOs. I traveled abroad quite a bit with our research and production teams, and got to go overseas and see corn grown in a lot of really interesting places. I was able to launch an internal communications app for the first time, really focused on connectivity and engagement within our organization. And then it was also part of the launch of Advantage Acre, which is our digital ag platform that you heard about. So really great opportunity that was on my path. That was definitely a detour. So you're probably sitting there thinking, well, good for you, Sam. That is great. That your plan worked. That's great. But what does this matter to me? I'm new in my career. What do I do about it? So next, I'd like to talk about what if everything that you plan for actually happens, and that's a real thing too. What the heck do you do now? And I think that's a really valid question. So as we think about rule number 2 from my perspective in career planning, it really is to reassess and evolve that plan, because even the best made plans, there's going to be things that change. But keeping that career plan fresh and current, it's just like updating your resume, making sure that it has the most relevant information in it as possible. So pausing for a minute and kind of thinking, what am I passionate about? Is it still the same things? Are they still the same things that I was passionate about when I first drafted this? What else can I do? What other challenges can I take on? What else do I want to learn? As you go down the path of your career, especially in our case here at AgReliant, it's a really diverse company, and I got to see and learn about a lot of different facets of our business that I had never before considered. And one of those things, specifically was the digital ag world. There's so many things that have changed. There's new positions being created every day. You've got to kind of continue to update your career plan to reflect the evolution of the industry that you're in, the company that you're working for, and the environment that you're exposed to. So making sure that you're staying on top of all of that is critical, and kind of going with the flow of the path that your career is taking. So for me, the additions and reassessment of my career plan, instead of a communications and marketing a master's degree, I decided to pursue an MBA with a sales management focus. And that, like I said, primarily had to do with the fact that I had seen so much more of our company. I had learned more about business development opportunities and other areas of our business that I was completely unfamiliar with, and I wanted a broader understanding of true business operations fundamentally. And I fell in love with the concept of providing value to our customers and understanding the sales process and what motivates people to make purchases, and how can we continue to facilitate that discussion at the farm level. So I pursued an MBA and was able to work on a couple of different projects specific to things that I had seen and been exposed to at AgReliant, which was hugely relevant to me and made me really reaffirm that was the right decision for me at the time. So my role now is in digital agriculture, and as a digital ag lead, it again is a first-time position for AgReliant, and I really focus more on training and kind of coaching and developing our sales teams and helping them utilize the digital tools that we have alongside our customers. And I've always been interested in kind of teaching, and growing up in 4-H and FFA. I love presenting. I always appreciated those kind of projects and things that I was able to work on. But, truly at the end of the day, it's really about the transfer of skills. And my background in communication makes me a better presenter, a better trainer, because it's all about effective communication and transferring that knowledge and skill set that I had from the foundation into my new role. So being flexible and willing to adapt is really important on your career path as well. So kind of for me, I wanted to conclude my section with a little bit of travel advice on this journey. So we'll start there at the top. Really, one of the things that I recommend is to work with a travel agent. So what do I mean by that? That's the mentors both inside and outside of your organization, identifying your network of folks that you can rely on and ask questions of as you're developing your career path. And I think the people outside of your organization are just as important as those internal folks that you're beginning to connect with. It's always great to have another set of eyes to provide feedback that have had different experiences or can relate to things in a different way than what you've already experienced. Identifying peers are really important. Casey and I literally started on the same day. We interviewed at the same time out of college, and he's provided a great peer resource for me as I'm thinking about some of the things I want to do. That's a really important piece professionally, is to find those allies. Additionally, using a service like TripAdvisor or Yelp on a travel adventure is always beneficial, and I consider those tools to be similar to LinkedIn. Don't be afraid to scroll through and search for roles at other companies. Every role that I've had here, both or including the one that I started at AgReliant, was a created position. Like, I didn't even know that they existed. So the only way that you're going to find those opportunities, and maybe even have the opportunity to develop a role in your own organization, is to search, to brainstorm, to think creatively, and taking a look at other opportunities on LinkedIn can help you do that. And for those employers on the phone, I'm not saying that all of your employees should go look for other jobs. Fundamentally, I just think reading job descriptions and understanding kind of the breadth and scope of some of the other opportunities that are out there can really help fuel the creativity within your own organization. And then reviewing the experience of mentors and leaders that you view in your network. You may have individuals that you think that they've been with your company forever, but you connect with them on LinkedIn and find that they had a out of industry early career experience that you've never really talked to them about. That makes for great question and discussion. Go to lunch with those folks and ask them a little bit about how they found themselves in the roles that they're in. And use that as your cheat sheet and study guide, kind of social media stock, if you will, professionally, and check out some of the things that they've accomplished and done, and the people that they're connected to, and use that to fuel some discussion. Join a travel club. So AAA was kind of on my mind with that one, but definitely join industry organizations that can help expand your career. So I've listed quite a few there that have had a strong influence on me professionally, including American Sea Trade Association and the FUSE initiative. Got Indiana Crop Improvement, that's more here at the local level, but has broadened my horizons and created a great network. National FFA organization, I still volunteer and give back there. Seeing young professionals, seeing those folks that I'm probably going to work for someday is inspiring and also a little terrifying, but it does keep me motivated within the industry and helps me stay on top of things, as well as the National Agri-Marketing Association. Same concept there for me, but always going back to that annual conference is always a shot in the arm. It's really great to be excited and kind of refueled, and it's really important on your career path to have those organizations that you feel like you get those positive experiences from. And then any one of the Tri-Societies, I mean, there's constantly educational content like the webinar you're on today being fueled through those organizations. So make sure that you're doing your research and getting involved in those where you can. And then finally, I just challenge you to really think of what is your dream destination. Really challenge yourself. If money were no object, if all of your student loans were paid off, if you didn't have a mortgage or rent to be paid, your car was paid for, what would you be doing? How would you want to spend your time? Where would you spend your energy? You spend entirely too much time in your career, and I think Casey will talk about it a little bit, to not enjoy it. So challenge yourself. What are you passionate about? What gets you out of bed every morning other than bacon? And get excited about those things and build that into your career plan. It may not happen tomorrow, but it's a plan and it's a map. That destination may not be next door, but it's all part of the experience and the journey. So that concludes my first segment here. I will turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Zeller, to keep rolling.
Great. Well, thanks, Sammy. And my name is Casey Zeller, and great to be on the call here this afternoon. I'm the marketing development lead with LG Seeds. And so I'll echo a lot of what Samantha talked about here and kind of give my perspective. on my career, and then also just give you some thoughts on some career planning maybe that I have tried to implement as well. Samantha and I have both talked just offline. We're still in the infancy in our careers as well, so we're still learning alongside you too. So we still have a lot to learn and have made a lot of mistakes, and sure we'll make some more too. But I think that's just the fun of being in a career and learning along the way. So I'm going to start here just talking a little bit about my career path that I've had so far, and it'll be interesting to look back in 10 or 15 years to see how the plans that I've had, how those have changed as well. And I think, as Sammy mentioned, we all have an idea of what our career path may look like, but sometimes that just doesn't exactly turn out to be that way. So my plan was to go into sales for 2 or 3 years, hopefully move into some type of marketing role, and then become a marketing manager for one of our brands at AgReliant. And that was kind of my 5 to 10 year plan. And many of those things happened, maybe in a different order, but also I've had some other roles that is exactly the jobs that I needed at that time to really get me to where I am today. And going along with what Samantha said, a lot of the roles that came up were new, so I really couldn't have prepared for those really as I began to build out what I would like to do. And really, although it wasn't the path I completely envisioned, I think the diverse experience I've had so far has helped to kind of really challenge my thinking and prepare me for future roles as well. So I'm going to start back here just a little bit to give you a background on how I got to where I am today and really where my passion started for agriculture. So I grew up on a family farm, as Jonathan talked about. We raised registered Angus cattle as well as row crop corn and soybeans. And my 2 brothers and I, had the opportunity to grow up on the farm. And really, our parents really instilled work ethic and just the love and passion for ag and the seed industry specifically for me. And I think my point here is whatever you do, whether it be in the seed industry or on agriculture or outside, make sure it's your passion. We have a lot of time to work, and so if it's not your passion, you might want to reevaluate if that's the right career choice for you. Something else I put on here is the funeral home, and so you probably weren't expecting that, but I had the unique opportunity to work at a funeral home my junior and senior year in high school, and also my freshman year in college. So if you catch me sometime, or feel free to give me a call, I'll give you the background on how I got there. But it was, and I'll share you some interesting stories at some point. I probably have days and days of interesting funeral home stories. But the reason I put this on here is because, this is probably where I learned some of my most important life lessons and things that I look back on today that really have really shaped my career. One of the biggest things that I can look back on is that I learned how to deal with people in some of the most difficult times in their lives. And so as I moved into AgReliant and probably any job that I would have taken, you learn to deal with different types of people, different personalities. And so I guess, don't throw away any of those past experiences that you've had in the past, because those help to shape you, whether it be, you're dipping ice cream at Dairy Queen, or you have, you're mowing grass in the summer, you work on the family farm. All those things really help to build those experiences that take you to the next level. So then I also went to Purdue University. And that's really where I made a lot of networking up. I had a lot of networking opportunities, and for me, more than anything, I was able to learn how to learn. There's a lot of things I forget from college, but one of the biggest lessons I learned was just how to learn, and that's helped me in my career as well. During college, I also had 2 internships with Dow AgriSciences, or Corteva today, and really that helped to instill and give me the opportunity to determine what do I want to do in a career. And those two internships really gave me that opportunity to say, I really want to stay within the ag industry on that business side. I like the marketing. Sales was an opportunity as well. And so it kind of allowed me to determine what my next steps were going to be. So in college, I got an offer from AgReliant and decided to go to AgReliant Genetics. And I started in the sales trainee program. And like I mentioned, my goal was to really stay in sales for 2 to 3 years, or at least to really get that sales experience. But there was some roles that had been developed that came up, and my ultimate goal was to get into marketing. And so there was a business analyst role that came up within AgReliant. And so very similar to Samantha, on the description it said you needed 5 to 7 years of experience, which I had. Definitely did not have that. Very similar to her, I just been out of high school not too long, and just had a few years, and had my 4 years in college. And so, but my ultimate goal was to get into marketing. And so I did talk to the hiring manager and was able to get that role. And so that really was a great opportunity for me to really think outside of what I thought marketing was. And so many people think, hey, marketing is design or creative. But I had the opportunity to see a different side, and to see more of the business side, the strategy behind marketing, and the numbers in that role as well. Then I had the opportunity to kind of change roles a bit as a commercial marketing manager, and Samantha and I were both marketing managers together there for a couple of years, and really got to kind of work with the brands. I worked with our Golden Acres brand down in Texas, where they focus in on sorghum. So kind of got to see a different side of the business compared to what I grew up on with corn and soybeans, and also worked on some other projects with digital ag and also seed treatments. And I'm going to talk a little bit about in a minute, taking on some challenges maybe someone else doesn't want to take on, and I did that in that role, which I believe really helped to allowed me to excel and move into some other roles as well. And then I am currently, like I said, the marketing team lead with LG Seeds. So I moved into one of our brands, and I'll talk a little bit about too. This has probably been one of the most challenging years and rewarding years for me. We brought together 5 of our U.S. brands into to the LG brand this past year, and so really got to see all the challenges that it takes to bring in multiple brands together, the different personalities, the different cultures, and so that's been a great opportunity for me this past year to really develop, and it really wasn't what I was expecting in my career, but like I said, exactly what I needed. A lot of people coming out of college or newer into their careers will ask, hey, what advice do you have, just being 9 years out from Purdue? And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got and always like to pass along is take on the challenges that no one else wants to tackle. And I think, both Samantha and I can both attest to that there were many jobs that we took on that maybe others weren't thinking about or really didn't want to take on. And most of the time, that's where you get the best reward. Those are challenging, but that's where you can learn the most and make significant impacts to your company. A good example for me is when I was in the business analyst role. I did have some responsibility with our sales systems. So at that time, we were looking to integrate CRM, or customer relationship management system, into our sales force. And if you read anything on CRM systems, whether it be in agriculture or outside of agriculture, it's one of the most difficult things to do in implementing those into a sales organization. So I learned a ton throughout that process that helped me, especially in this role when everything was so new and bringing all of these brands back together. So make sure you take on those challenges that really no one wants to tackle. And I think hopefully I continue to do that throughout my entire career. So transitioning here a little bit on career planning. There's really three things I want to talk about here today, and I think these really coincide with what Samantha talked about too, but really the first part will be just really owning your development. You're in charge of your development, no one else is. And then talk a little bit about owning your strengths. Obviously, we all have strengths and we have weaknesses, and maybe focusing in on those strengths and kind of working around those weaknesses. And then one of the biggest things that I want to talk about is just getting comfortable with change. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've struggled with in my career so far, is just all the change that's happened. But I have learned probably in the past 3 years the most that I've got to get really comfortable with it because it's inevitable and it will be with me throughout my entire career. So owning your development. One of the things that I kind of got 5 different points here on owning your development. A lot of people will say sometimes, hey, I think I'm just going to let it happen. But to me, that's not much of a strategy. And like Samantha and I have kind of both talked about, I think it's good to have a plan, but also to be flexible in that plan, because you never know what's going to happen. But it's good to kind of write your own story. No one else can really take control of your development but you, and no one else is going to do it for you. So make sure you write your own story and kind of take control of that plan. Also, making sure you stay aligned with what you're evaluated on. I think this is another important point, which sometimes gets overlooked, is make sure that you and your manager align on your goals for your specific role at that time. You know, your vision of success and your manager's vision of success may be significantly different. So make sure you align on that in that role. Also, blind spots. So these would be things that maybe you're not attuned to, or just don't notice or are not aware of. And so this is a great opportunity for you to ask your boss or leaders for advice on how you could improve. This could be after a presentation or after a specific meeting. And like Samantha said, you know, I rely on her as a peer resource. You know, I can go to her and say, Sammy, what did you think about that? Any advice? Is there anything I need to be aware of that I'm not? I think that's a critical question to ask, you know, throughout the entire year, to make sure you're attuned to those blind spots so you can begin to work on those as well. Going back to taking on the task that no one else wants to take on, maybe becoming an expert in an area of importance. One thing that I think that Samantha and I have both done is work in some areas that have become pretty important to AgReliant. And one of those for me has been seed treatments. You know, seed treatments has been really becoming very important for our business and our seed business. And so I've gotten involved in that, and also being a part of digital ag or Advantage Acre for AgReliant. But the digital ag business within AgReliant and outside of has become extremely important and is a pretty hot topic at this point. So becoming an expert in those areas help to really differentiate you. And then also my last point on owning your development is really finding a good mentor. Like Samantha talked about on the travel agent, seek out those within the organization and try to meet in really an informal way. I think it works best when maybe you identify a couple people in your organization that you think might be a good fit. Begin to talk to them, ask questions, and then try to develop some of those relationships and find some good mentors and counsel to get some good advice along your path. And I know that Samantha and I have both done that. I think it's really been invaluable for us. So you may have heard a quote before. It says, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And so you see a bag of flaming hot Cheetos on the screen. So you're probably like, where is Casey going with this? But the story behind how flaming hot Cheetos came to be is a pretty great example of how luck kind of was in play, but also the person I'm going to talk about, he was pretty prepared to meet this opportunity that came to him. So I want to share a story about Richard Montanez and his hunger and preparation for success that really afforded him the opportunity to not only invent Flaming Hot Cheetos, but also become an executive at PepsiCo. So to give you a little background on Richard, he was actually a Mexican immigrant who grew up in a migrant labor camp in Southern California. He had 10 siblings, and his parents were together in this camp. And there's really not much opportunity for him. They had pretty much only the clothes on their back, not much money. He spoke very little English, but he was a pretty tenacious young man. And so his goal was to get a job in the U.S., and he began to put a plan together from the very beginning. So he was able to get he also became a janitor at Frito-Lay, and that was really his first job. And then later started to work on the bagging line for Cheetos, where one day a disaster happened. A batch of those Cheetos didn't get that orange cheese powder that we all love. So he took some of those Cheetos that hadn't been dusted with the powder home and started to experiment with some chili powder. Long story short, he was able to pitch this to some of his executives. He wore a $3 tie, and his spicy version of the classic became one of Frito-Lay's most popular items. And so, although he had a little luck, he also took advantage of a mistake in the manufacturing line to write his own story, his own success. And I think his hunger and planning really allowed him to become the executive that he is today at PepsiCo. So I think for me, this was kind of a really great reminder of how I can take advantage of opportunities that come my way, and reminded me that there's times I need to take risks, and that it's my responsibility to kind of write my own story. Yeah, certainly luck can play a role in that, but I need to be prepared to take advantage of those opportunities when they come my way. So I thought that was a pretty good example of how luck can certainly play a role, but making sure you're prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that come your way are critically important. One last thing I want to talk about with Richard is, and I truly do believe this, is make sure you don't take your position for granted. Whether you're the janitor or the CEO, act like you own the company, and I think that can take you very far in your careers. My next point was just really about owning your strengths. So obviously we all have strengths and weaknesses, but I think sometimes we don't really know which strengths we do possess. So I think being able to identify those strengths is a very valuable tool. And I think most leaders spend most of their time developing their weaknesses and really applying those in the workplace. So stick to those core strengths and really try to work around those weaknesses. Should you ignore your weaknesses altogether? Absolutely not. I think you need to find ways to overcome those weaknesses. And for me, one of the best ways I've done that is to kind of leverage the strengths of others. So, Samantha and I have worked really closely over the past 9 years at AgReliant, and have kind of gone down these parallel paths with different experiences. But I really try to leverage some of Samantha's strengths that I don't have, and really focus in on maybe some of the strengths that I do have. One other piece of advice on this is just find positions that really play well to those strengths, and maybe where some of those other weaknesses are irrelevant. And that's not always possible. There's going to be jobs that you take on maybe that you're not perfectly fit for, and that you have to learn along the way. But if you can find roles that kind of fit those strengths, that works very, very well. My last topic here is just really getting comfortable with change. And like I mentioned earlier, probably the biggest challenge for me over my career so far is just getting comfortable with the constant change. I was fairly comfortable with things just changing here and there, but it feels like over the past few years there's just been constant change. And if you look at our industry, a lot of the acquisitions and different purchases throughout our industry, the change has been pretty immense. And if you look even at a farmer level, and just the challenges that we have in prices today, there's a lot of change there that affect all of our businesses. But change is constant, and so for me, this past year in 2018, like I mentioned, LG probably saw some of the largest changes that we've ever seen as a company in probably the past couple of decades. And so, like I said, it's probably been one of the most challenging years for me, but also the most rewarding. So bringing in 5 brands into one U.S. Dealer brand has been a great learning opportunity for me. And there was literally change every single day. And I felt like we had a fairly good plan in place, but there was things that were thrown our way that we really had to be prepared for. So whether it be in role and structure and organization, make sure you're prepared for that change. Also, maintaining a positive attitude. For me, one of the most critical points for anybody I'm hiring or anybody that's a part of our team, that they maintain a positive attitude. Is that easy all the time? Absolutely not. But I think just being optimistic, even when you're not happy, is one of the things I try to work on and try to instill as within our teams as well. Always learning new skills, and once again, kind of using those strengths to navigate the change that's just inevitable throughout our career. But sometimes it's just more than others. So my last point here is just one thing that I like to do really once a year, but and this would be a little bit more informal than anything, but just try to conduct a career assessment. And I think it kind of helps me to ensure that I'm on the right track, that I'm identifying any potential problems before they take really a long-term toll on me. And also during that assessment really helps me to identify some opportunities as well. So some of the things I like to do is, do my goals align with my long-term priorities? So I like to equate this to like a diagnostics test. So it's much like a diagnostics test on a vehicle. So if you think about, are you in alignment? That's a really good question to ask. So when your tire's out of alignment, you can slowly veer off course. Even when you don't even notice it. So for me, taking a little time to evaluate if my professional goals are in alignment with my personal goals is really critical. So I think misalignment of career and personal goals can make you completely miserable, certainly. So for me, my wife and I both work. We have 2 kids. And so there's things that I have to do quite a bit, is my career goals or my personal goals or, my financial and faith goals. In alignment, and sometimes I have to get myself realigned, but I do have to ask myself that question quite a bit. How are the brakes? The ability to stop is a pretty critical piece of a vehicle, right? And if you don't, you can have an accident. And so the need to disconnect from work is pretty healthy, and is essential for a good work-life balance. For me, this is one of the biggest things I have to work on quite often. I like to have my foot on the accelerator, go full force, but also I have 2 kids at home and a wife too. And so sometimes I have to put on the brakes to ensure I'm kind of focused on what's truly important. And then my next question would be, are your signals clear? So one of the most frustrating things for me following somebody is when they turn and they don't have their turn signal on. But if somebody doesn't have their signals on, you don't know which direction we're going to go and what their intent is. Are they going right? Are they going left? Are they going straight? Some questions that kind of that I have to ask myself for my career is, do you have open lines of communication between my boss? Like I mentioned this past year, I really had to assess this quite often as we brought together our teams and the LG brand. Am I communicating clearly? Is there tension between team members that need addressed? Are my signals clear there? And then my last point would be, am I running efficiently? So, emissions tests on a vehicle or a diagnostic test can really give you the view of how much gas you're burning or oil, how much gas or oil you are burning, which can affect your performance. So in a career, it kind of might be a little bit more difficult to evaluate, but one thing you can do is see how well you are engaged. Are you feeling less productive? that might be a time for you to reevaluate your job. Also, hey, is your gas tank full? Are you energized, both physically and mentally? If not, you might need to get a bit of you might need to fill your tank a bit and talk through that. But something to be thinking about. So do a bit of a diagnostics test on your career, whether it be making sure that you're in alignment, that you need to kind of push on the brakes a little bit, that you might need to ensure that everyone understands your intent, and also just making sure that you're excited, that you're full of energy, and that you have what you need to be successful in your career. So that kind of highlights, I think, closes out Samantha and I's discussion today. And I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan, maybe to allow us for a few questions as well.
Wow, thank you, Casey, and thank you, Samantha, for sharing your experiences and your perspectives on your careers so far and where you're headed. I'm absolutely sure that you provided our listeners with some insights and examples that they can use. So as Casey said, we now have time for you to ask your questions to all the listeners. I see that there are a few already coming in, and I'll remind you to type your questions in the question box at the bottom of your window, and I'll pick a few that seem to be most common. We have about 9 minutes here. So one of the very first ones that came in, and Casey, you may have alluded to it here toward the end with your communications diagnostics, but the question is, do I share my career plan? And if I do, with whom?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you absolutely want to share your career plan, and as it changes, I think you could also share that as well. And for me, and at AgReliant, one things we do on a quarterly basis with our managers is meet with them and talk about specific questions within our careers. You know, are we on track? Is there anything we need to be thinking about? Going back to those blind spots, are there blind spots we need to be aware of that we should be working on? And we also just have the opportunity to talk about what our goals are or if they have changed. So I think you need to be in constant communication with your manager and those within your team so they understand what path you want to go down. And it also gives them the opportunity to say, hey, there's this job that is coming available and you might want to think about it, or let somebody know that, hey, Casey or Samantha is interested in this role that may not have been created in the past. So I guess I'd say, yeah, definitely want to share that plan with your leadership.
Okay. Casey and Samantha, I find it interesting that the question gets asked. So are there potential risks or situations or how you present your career plan that you might talk about?
Yeah, I think I'll take this one. You know, that's where you've got to start to develop that relationship with your boss, your supervisor at that point. But then also those other mentors. You know, there's always the risk that they could take a look at it. And I guess the worst thing they could say is, you know, this doesn't seem realistic, or provide some challenges, and that's either going to motivate you or give you, you know, pause to reevaluate. You know, I think it because it is a work in progress, it is always an evolution. It's always good to get feedback, but then it's your choice as a professional to what to do with that feedback, whether you want to pivot or stay the course. So, you know, I would also say that you don't necessarily have to share the entire plan. If there's a smaller segment, you know, here's what I want to accomplish in the next year or 2 years, and that's all you want to share with your boss. You know, maybe you want to be CEO of the company, and so does your boss, so you don't want to have that awkward conversation. You know, maybe you could just say, you know, this is really what I want to accomplish in the next 2 years. Can you help me get there? And then focus on those longer term goals with, you know, the next person or another mentor that can provide separate feedback.
Right. So what I hear the biggest risk is actually somebody giving you feedback and saying, maybe you need to modify it. Maybe that's a little bit pushing the envelope a little, but no political sort of risk, or you're not really interested in this job because you have aspirations of something bigger. You haven't had that experience.
Yep, and I mean, I suppose, depending on the organization, it just depends on the relationship that you have. But yeah, I would say you're going to get feedback. It's good to have another set of eyes on it and to have that dialogue and discussion to be able to defend your path and plan.
Mm-hmm. But so Samantha, you mentioned mentors, and that is actually one of the questions here. Is how do I identify mentors? What am I looking for? And then there was another one. Should I have more than one? Since we're using plural.
Yeah. I definitely think there's power in numbers there. And Casey mentioned it a little bit in kind of more of an informal way. I think the folks that I would consider to be mentors in my life, there are specific things that I know I can go to them for. So, if I'm looking for kind of the next step for me, if I'm looking for kind of an intellectual challenge, I have a specific individual that I know that I can go to that will be a little bit harder on me, that will ask me tough questions and make me defend myself and say, is this really what you want to do? That'll kind of provide that feedback. And then I've got the folks that are probably more the cheerleaders for me, that even if I said that I wanted to do something completely crazy, they would be like, no, yes, we're going to do that. I'm going to help you get there. They're just a little bit more excited. And, I think as you grow in your career, just truly through networking, kind of organically, the people that you interact with, whether it be your, direct supervisor and people outside of your team, that's how I've found my mentors, just through networking. And I think about a few individuals within the American Seed Trade Association. By getting outside of my comfort zone and getting involved, you start to expand your network, and then you just observe and listen to people. That's a huge part of identifying a mentor, is listening to others and the experiences that they've had. I think in the ag industry in particular, people that are veterans of the industry that are, higher level positions, they want young people to ask them questions. They want to share. They want to help. So I have never had a negative experience in asking folks for feedback or asking, well, how is it that you found yourself in your role? How did you find your niche? I think innately people want to help. So there's not like a recipe for success, I would say. There's hardly a wrong way to go about it other than being too pushy, and saying, will you be my mentor? And then wanting to talk to them every day. You've got to be respectful of people's times and schedules. But just, kind of using common sense and creating dialogue and conversation, and definitely listening is the best way to go about it from my perspective.
And also, too, I think to go along with what Samantha said, I think it's good to have mentors within, within the business that you're working in, and also outside too. So I think it's always nice to get somebody else's perspective. So I think it's good to have, mentors that are outside the ag industry or, at your church or something that you can kind of rely on for other questions and to get their perspective too.
Okay. All right. So I really hear that it's okay to have the mentors outside of your own company.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we got time for one more question here, and I'm going to roll a couple of them together. And it sounds something like this: how do I say no when what I'm being asked to do is not aligned with my career plan? That's when I feel like it's self-serve. Is that self-serving? How do I say no?
That's a good question. Casey and I are probably really bad examples of people who say no. We have a tendency to overstress ourselves sometimes. But I think maybe a hard no would be the wrong way to go about it. I think it's fair to ask more questions, clarifying questions. So, and frankly, there's going to be times in your career where you're going to be asked to do something and you are literally the only person that is going to get that done, and you're not going to like it, but you're going to be better for it by kind of putting your nose down and getting through it. It's not forever in most of those cases. It's just a task or something that needs to be accomplished, and there's always learning to be gleaned from it. But I think being a little selfish is okay too, but asking, okay, listen, I understand that this is what I have to do right now in this role. can we talk about what's next, or can you help, asking for connectivity between, this is actually what I want to end up doing. Can you help me, make some connections in the process? They're going to strengthen my ability to achieve this goal over here. There's always connectivity, whether you see it on the surface or not, but you just kind of got to be patient in some cases to get through that. And I would just caution from saying no right out of the gate, especially if you're early in your career. I think if Casey or I would have said no to some of the things that looked daunting or didn't look like they were connected, we wouldn't be sitting where we are today and enjoying what we're doing. So kind of keep an open mind, but don't be afraid to ask why.
Yeah, definitely ask why. That's something I've learned a little bit. I've learned a lot over the past 9 years. Because at the beginning, I probably never said no. And now I even if I want to say no, I just begin to ask a lot of questions on, why it's important, to go back to what Samantha said. And usually by the end, I'm like, hey, I understand why that's important. And maybe that's just my personality, or probably our generation as a whole, but we like to know why. And it's not that I don't want to do it. It's just I'm curious to know how it's going to affect the business, and I think it's great to have those types of conversations.
Mm-hmm. Right. If you know what you're looking for, you'll probably find it in that assignment. That's
right.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I know this has been a useful presentation for all of us, whether we're at the beginning of our career, middle of our career, or even at the end of our career. Planning for the future is something we all benefit from. We should remember many of these points that were shared today. So if I could ask you to advance to the next slide, and I'd like to just close by saying thank you, Samantha and Casey, for giving us a personal view and best practices about career planning. And we really identified with some aspect of your experience, I'm sure. To all of the participants, we thank you for your interest and your active participation through questions in this webinar. Our next webinar in the ASTA Tri-Societies Career Development Series is Don't Make Me Turn This Car Around, Managing Work-Life Balance. And that will be held 1 month from today on April 24th, 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. So until then, I thank you, Samantha and Casey, for joining us, and all the participants. We'll see you in a month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.